Good morning and welcome. We are in our AM session for June the 11th, Tuesday. And now we will begin to return to our study of Red Badge. I just want to make a quick comment for your Omega record sheet. As you're looking at that Omega record sheet now with me, you want to sign off on all of the work of yesterday, Monday. Being specific can help you. So under reading, for example, you can say Red Badge and actually put the pages that you worked with. You can also add under annotations that work of Psalm of Life that we finished with yesterday. Let us then be up and doing with a heart for any faith. For those of you who are doing any kind of make-up work, just to remind, now you want to be sure that you are paying attention with Miss Laird to try to get all of your work done before July 3 so that you then do not have to come in for that final week. Our work of today, just for those of you who like to have the lay of the land, our work of today will be to continue with our study of Red Badge. We will then do an annotation reading out of our orange literature text there, and then we will break. We will come back, and today we will do our first of several required essays where you will be typing in the program. I think most of you are familiar with My Access. You will then be typing up an essay and you will be submitting that essay for scoring purposes. Now our project here just involves reminding you just that you do the work. We're not worrying about your scores or anything like that. That again is just a matter of getting the work done. Okay? Any questions, logistic in nature? Mr. Smith has informed me that today we will be joined by apparently the fire crew who will be testing the school fire alarms. So periodically, if you hear the fire alarms going off, don't jump up and run to save your hair. We'll be all right. To just sit here and continue to work, Mr. Smith says. Mr. Umsbaugh points out there's no need to worry about saving his hair, that is. So we will now move quickly to our work of Red Badge of Courage. We now are moving into the heart, really, of the novel. The young man who is having to come to terms with A, running away, B, returning, and C, finally deciding how he will respond in the moment of the great battle to earn his Red Badge of Courage. Miss Laird.
Okay. We're on page 55. Top off your notes with chapter 8. The date is 6/11.
Chapter 8. The trees began softly to sing a hymn of twilight. The sun sank until slanted bronze rays struck the forest. There was a lull in the noises of insects, as if they had bowed their beaks and were making a devotional pause. There was silence, save for the chanted chorus of the trees. Then, upon this stillness, there suddenly broke a tremendous clangour of sounds. A crimson roar came from the distance. The youth stopped. He was transfixed by this terrific medley of all noises. It was as if worlds were being rended. There was the ripping sound of musketry and the breaking crash of the artillery. His mind flew in all directions. He conceived the two armies to be at each other, panther fashion. He listened for a time. Then he began to run in the direction of the battle. He saw that it was an ironical thing for him to be running thus toward that which he had been at such pains to avoid. But he said, in substance, to himself, that if the earth and the moon were about to clash, many persons would doubtless plan to get upon the roofs to witness the collision. As he ran, he became aware that the forest had stopped its music, as if at last become incapable of hearing the foreign sounds. The trees hushed and stood motionless. Everything seemed to be listening to the crackle and clatter and earth-shaking thunder. The chorus peeped over the still earth. It suddenly occurred to the youth that the fight in which he had been was, after all, but perfunctory popping. In the hearing of this present din, he was doubtful if he had seen real battle scenes. This uproar explained a celestial battle. It was tumbling hordes a-struggle in the air. Reflecting, he saw a sort of a humor in the point of view of himself and his fellows during the late encounter. They had taken themselves and the enemy very seriously, and had imagined that they were deciding the war. Individuals must have supposed that they were cutting the letters of their names deep into everlasting tablets of brass, or enshrining their reputations forever in the hearts of their countrymen, while, as to fact, the affair would appear in printed reports under a meek and immaterial title. But he saw that it was good. Else, he said, in battle everyone would surely run, save forlorn hopes and their ilk. He went rapidly on. He wished to come to the edge of the forest, that he might peer out. As he hastened, there passed through his mind pictures of stupendous conflicts. His accumulated thought upon such subjects was used to form scenes. The noise was as the voice of an eloquent being, describing. Sometimes the brambles formed chains and tried to hold him back. Trees, confronting him, stretched out their arms and forbade him to pass. After its previous hostility, this new resistance of the forest filled him with a fine bitterness. It seemed that nature could not be quite ready to kill him. But he obstinately took roundabout ways, and presently he was where he could see long gray walls of vapor where lay battle lines. The voices of cannon shook him. The musketry sounded in long, irregular surges that played havoc with his ears. He stood regarded for a moment. His eyes had an awestruck expression. He gawked in the direction of the fight. Presently he proceeded again on his forward way. The battle was like the grinding of an immense and terrible machine to him. Its complexities and powers, its grim processes, fascinated him. He must go close and see it produce corpses. He came to a fence and clambered over it. On the far side, the ground was littered with clothes and guns. A newspaper, folded up, lay in the dirt. A dead soldier was stretched with his face hidden in his arm. Farther off, there was a group of 4 or 5 corpses keeping mournful company. A hot sun had blazed upon this spot. In this place, the youth felt that he was an invader. This forgotten part of the battleground was owned by the dead men, and he hurried, in the vague apprehension that one of the swollen forms would rise and tell him to be gone. He came finally to a road from which he could see in the distance dark and agitated bodies of troops, smoke-fringed. In the lane was a blood-stained crowd streaming to the rear. The wounded men were cursing, groaning, and wailing. In the air always was a mighty swell of sound that it seemed could sway the earth. With the courageous words of the artillery and the spiteful sentences of the musketry mingled red cheers. And from this region of noises came the steady current of the maimed. One of the wounded men had a shoeful of blood. He hopped like a schoolboy in a game. He was laughing hysterically. One was swearing that he had been shot in the arm through the commanding general's mismanagement of the army. One was marching with an air imitative of some sublime drum major. Upon his features was an unholy mixture of merriment and agony. As he marched, he sang a bit of doggerel in a high and quavering voice. Sing a song of victory, a pocket full of bullets, 25 dead men baked in a pie. Parts of the procession limped and staggered to this tune. Another had the gray seal of death already upon his face. His lips were curled in hard lines, and his teeth were clenched. His hands were bloody from where he had pressed them upon his wound. He seemed to be awaiting the moment when he should pitch headlong. He stalked like the specter of a soldier, his eyes burning with the power of a stare into the unknown. There were some who proceeded sullenly, full of anger at their wounds, and ready to turn upon anything as an obscure cause. An officer was carried along by 2 privates. He was peevish. "Don't juggle so, Johnson, you fool!" he cried. "Think my leg is made of iron? If you can't carry me decent, put me down and let someone else do it." He bellowed at the tottering crowd who blocked the quick march of his bearers. "Say, make way there, can't you? Make way! Tickets take it all!" They sulkily parted and went to the roadsides. As he was carried past, they made pert remarks to him. When he raged in reply and threatened them, they told him to be damned. The shoulder of one of the tramping bearers knocked heavily against the spectral soldier who was staring into the unknown. The youth joined this crowd and marched along with it. The torn bodies expressed the awful machinery in which the men had been entangled. Orderlies and couriers occasionally broke through the throng in the roadway, scattering wounded men right and left, galloping on, followed by howls. The melancholy march was continually disturbed by the messengers, and sometimes by bustling batteries that came swinging and thumping down upon them, the officers shouting orders to clear the way. There was a tattered man, fouled with dust.
Okay, before we move on, a couple of things to mark down. So he came out of wandering in the woods into the wounded and joined them. You should be writing this down, everybody sitting up. And any other observations you guys had from what we just listened to? Okay, continuing on, middle of page 59.
Dust, blood, and powder stain from hair to shoes, who trudged quietly at the youth's side. He was listening with eagerness and much humility to the lurid descriptions of a bearded sergeant. His lean features wore an expression of awe and admiration. He was like a listener in a country store to wondrous tales told among the sugar barrels. He eyed the storyteller with unspeakable wonder. His mouth was agape in yokel fashion. The sergeant, taking note of this, gave pause to his elaborate history while he administered a sardonic comment. "Be careful, honey, you'll be catching flies," he said. The tattered man shrank back, abashed. After a time, he began to sidle near to the youth, and in a diffident way tried to make him a friend. His voice was gentle as a girl's voice, and his eyes were pleading. The youth saw with surprise that the soldier had 2 wounds, one in the head, bound with a blood-soaked rag, and the other in the arm, making that member dangle like a broken bough. After they had walked together for some time, the tattered man mustered sufficient courage to speak. "It was a pretty good fight, wasn't it?" he timidly said. The youth, deep in thought, glanced up at the bloody and grim figure with its lamb-like eyes. "What? It was a pretty good fight, wasn't it?" "Yes," said the youth shortly. He quickened his pace. But the other hobbled industriously after him. There was an air of apology in his manner, but he evidently thought that he needed only to talk for a time, and the youth would perceive that he was a good fellow. "It was a pretty good fight, wasn't it?" he began in a small voice, and then he achieved the fortitude to continue. "Dear me, if I ever see fellows fight so. Laws, how they did fight. I know the boys like it when they once got square at it. The boys ain't had no fair chance up to now. This time they showed what they was. I knowed it'd turn out this way. You can't lick them boys, no, sir. They're fighters, they be." He breathed a deep breath of humble admiration. He had looked at the youth for encouragement several times. He received none, but gradually he seemed to get absorbed in his subject. "I was talking cross pickets with a boy from Georgia once, and that boy, he says, 'Your fellows all run like hell when they once heard a gun,' he says. 'Maybe they will,' I says, 'but I don't believe none of it,' I says. And by Jiminy, I says back to him, 'Maybe your fellows all run like hell when they once heard a gun,' I says." He laughed. "Well, they didn't run today, did they? Hey, no, sir, they fit, and fit, and fit." His homely face was suffused with a light of love for the army, which was to him all things beautiful and powerful. After a time, he turned to the youth. "Where you hit, old boy?" he asked in a brotherly tone. The youth felt instant panic at this question, although at first its full import was not borne in upon him. "What?" he asked. "Where you hit?" repeated the tattered man. "What?" began the youth. That is, why, I... He turned away suddenly and slid through the crowd. His brow was heavily flushed, and his fingers were picking nervously at one of his buttons. He bent his head and fastened his eyes studiously upon the button as if it were a little problem. The tattered man looked after him in astonishment. Chapter 9. The youth fell back in the procession until the tattered soldier was not in sight. Then he started to walk on with the others. But he was amid wounds. The mob of men was bleeding. Because of the tattered soldier's question, he now felt that his shame could be viewed. He was continually casting sidelong glances to see if the men were contemplating the letters of guilt he felt burned into his brow. At times he regarded the wounded soldiers in an envious way. He conceived persons with torn bodies to be peculiarly happy. He wished that he too had a wound, a red badge of courage.
There it is.
The spectral soldier was at his side like a stalking reproach. The man's eyes were still fixed in a stare into the unknown. His gray, appalling face had attracted attention in the crowd, and men, slowing to his dreary pace, were walking with him. They were discussing his plight, questioning him, and giving him advice. In a dogged way he repelled them, signing to them to go on and leave him alone. The shadows of his face were deepening, and his tight lips seemed holding in check the moan of great despair. There could be seen a certain stiffness in the movements of his body, as if he were taking infinite care not to arouse the passion of his wounds. As he went on, he seemed always looking for a place, like one who goes to choose a grave. Something in the gesture of the man as he waved the bloody and pitying soldiers away made the youth start, as if bitten. He yelled in horror. Tottering forward, he laid a quivering hand upon the man's arm. As the latter slowly turned his wax-like features toward him, the youth screamed, "God! Jim Conklin!" The tall soldier made a little commonplace smile. "Hello, Henry," he said. The youth swayed on his legs and glared strangely. He stuttered and stammered. "Oh, Jim! Oh, Jim! Oh, Jim!" The tall soldier held out his gory hand. There was a curious red and black combination of new blood and old blood upon it. "Where you been, Henry?" he asked. He continued in a monotonous voice. "I thought maybe you got keeled over. There's been thunder to pay today. I was worrying about it a good deal." The youth still lamented. "Oh, Jim! Oh, Jim! Oh, Jim!" "You know," said the tall soldier, "I was out there." He made a careful gesture. "And Lord, what a circus. And by Jimmy, I got shot. I got shot. Yes, by Jiminy, I got shot." He reiterated this fact in a bewildered way, as if he did not know how it came about. The youth put forth anxious arms to assist him, but the tall soldier went firmly, as if propelled. Since the youth's arrival as a guardian for his friend, the other wounded men had ceased to display much interest. They occupied themselves again in dragging their own tragedies toward the rear. Suddenly, as the two friends marched on, the tall soldier seemed to be overcome by a tremor. His face turned to a semblance of gray paste. He clutched the youth's arm and looked all about him, as if dreading to be overheard. Then he began to speak in a shaking whisper. "I tell you what I'm afraid of, Henry. The tell you what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid I'll fall down and then, and then damned artillery wagons, they like as not will run over me, and that's what I'm afraid of. The youth cried out to him hysterically. I'll take care of you, Jim. I'll take care of you. I swear to God I will. Sure, will you, Henry? The tall soldier beseeched. Yes, I tell you. I'll take care of you, Jim, protested the youth. He could not speak accurately because of the gulpings in his throat. But the tall soldier continued to beg in a lowly way. He now hung babe-like to the youth's arm. His eyes rolled in the wildness of his terror. I was always a good friend to you, wasn't I, Henry? I've always been a pretty good fellow, ain't I? It ain't much to ask, is it? Just to put me along out of the road? I'd do it for you, wouldn't I, Henry? He paused in piteous anxiety to await his friend's reply. The youth had reached an anguish where the sobs scorched him. He strove to express his loyalty, but he could only make fantastic gestures. However, the tall soldier seemed suddenly to forget all those fears. He became again the grim, stalking specter of a soldier. He went stonily forward. The youth wished his friend to lean upon him, but the other always shook his head and strangely protested. No. Leave me be. Leave me be. His look was fixed again upon the unknown. He moved with mysterious purpose, and all of the youth's offers he brushed aside. No. Leave me be. Leave me be.
Okay? Just to make sure everybody has that we're in chapter 9. He's still with the wounded. He's ran into his friend Jim, who has been shot. He's starting to feel even more guilty about running away. Okay. Top of page 64.
The youth had to follow. Presently, the latter heard a voice talking softly near his shoulder. Turning, he saw that it belonged to the tattered soldier. You better take him out of the road, partner. There's a battery coming. Hell, he moved down the road and he'll get run over. He's a gunner anyhow. In about 5 minutes, you can see that. You'd better take him out of the road. Where the blazes does he get his strength from? Lord knows, cried the youth. He was shaking his hands helplessly. He ran forward presently and grasped the tall soldier by the arm. Jim, he coaxed. Come with me. The tall soldier weakly tried to wrench himself free. He said vacantly. He stared at the youth for a moment. At last he spoke, as if dimly comprehending. Into the fields? He started blindly through the grass. The youth turned once to look at the lashing riders and jouncing guns of the battery. He was startled from this view by a shrill outcry from the tattered man. God, he's running! Turning his head swiftly, the youth saw his friend running in a staggering and stumbling way toward a little clump of bushes. His heart seemed to wrench itself almost free from his body at this sight. He made a noise of pain. He and the tattered man began a pursuit. There was a singular race. When he overtook the tall soldier, he began to plead with all the words he could find. Jim, what are you doing? What makes you do this way? You'll hurt yourself. The same purpose was in the tall soldier's face. He protested in a dulled way, keeping his eyes fastened on the mystic place of his intentions. No, don't touch me. Leave me be. Leave me be. The youth, aghast and filled with wonder at the tall soldier, began quaveringly to question him. Where you going, Jim? What are you thinking about? Where you going? Tell me, won't you, Jim? The tall soldier faced about as upon relentless pursuers. In his eyes there was a great appeal. Leave me be, can't you? Leave me be for a minute. The youth recoiled. Why, Jim, he said in a dazed way. What's the matter with you? The tall soldier turned and, lurching dangerously, went on. The youth and the tattered soldier followed, sneaking as if whipped, feeling unable to face the stricken man if he should again confront them. They began to have thoughts of a solemn ceremony. There was something rite-like in these movements of the doomed soldier, and there was a resemblance in him to a devotee of a mad religion, blood-sucking, muscle-wrenching, bone-crushing. They were awed and afraid. They hung back, lest he have at command a dreadful weapon. At last, they saw him stop and stand motionless. Hastening up, they perceived that his face wore an expression, telling that he had at last found the place for which he had struggled. His spare figure was erect. His bloody hands were quietly at his side. He was waiting with patience for something that he had come to meet. He was at the rendezvous. They paused and stood, expectant. There was a silence. Finally, the chest of the doomed soldier began to heave with a strained motion. It increased in violence until it was as if an animal was within and was kicking and tumbling furiously to be free. This spectacle of gradual strangulation made the youth writhe, and once as his friend rolled his eyes, he saw something in them that made him sink wailing to the ground. He raised his voice in a last supreme call. Jim! 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 The tall soldier opened his lips and spoke. He made a gesture. Leave me be. Don't touch me. Leave me be. There was another silence while he waited. Suddenly his form stiffened and straightened. Then it was shaken by a prolonged ague. He stared into space. To the two watchers there was a curious and profound dignity in the firm lines of his awful face. He was invaded by a creeping strangeness that slowly enveloped him. For a moment, the tremor of his legs caused him to dance a sort of hideous hornpipe. His arms beat wildly about his head in expression of imp-like enthusiasm. His tall figure stretched itself to its full height. There was a slight rending sound. Then it began to swing forward, slow and straight, in the manner of a falling tree. A swift muscular contortion made the left shoulder strike the ground first. The body seemed to bounce a little way from the earth. God, said the tattered soldier. The youth had watched, spellbound, this ceremony at the place of meeting. His face had been twisted into an expression of every agony he had imagined for his friend. He now sprang to his feet and, going closer, gazed upon the paste-like face. The mouth was open, and the teeth showed in a laugh. As the flap of the blue jacket fell away from the body, he could see that the side looked as if it had been chewed by wolves. The youth turned with sudden livid rage toward the battlefield. He shook his fist. He seemed about to deliver a philippic. Help! The red sun was pasted in the sky like a wafer.
Okay, before we go into chapter 10, go ahead and write down a few things that just happened. Jim ran ahead to the rendezvous, and then what happened? And they said that he had an ague, which is defined as a fever or shivering fit. So that's what happened to him before he collapsed. telling Henry that he didn't want his help, and he was basically running away from Henry and the Tattered Man.
Maybe he just didn't want them to see him die.
Or maybe he was trying to run away from the fact that he knew he was in on things. Okay. Chapter 10, page 67.
Chapter 10. The Tattered Man stood musing.
Well, he was a regular Jim Dandy for nerve, wasn't he?
Said he, finally, in a little awestruck voice.
A regular Jim Dandy.
He thoughtfully poked one of the docile hands with his foot.
I wonder where he got his strength from. I never seen a man do like that before. It was a funny thing. Well, he was a regular Jim Dandy.
The youth desired to screech out his grief. He was stabbed, but his tongue lay dead in the tube of his mouth. He threw himself again upon the ground and began to brood. The Tattered Man stood, musing.
Now, looky here, partner,
he said after a time. He regarded the corpse as he spoke.
He's up and gone, ain't he? And we might as well begin to look out for old number one. This here thing is all over. He's up and gone, ain't he? He's all right here. Nobody won't bother him. And I must say, I ain't enjoying any great help myself these days.
The youth, awakened by the tattered soldier's tone, looked quickly up. He saw that he was swinging uncertainly on his legs and that his face had turned to a shade of blue.
Good Lord,
he cried.
you ain't gonna... Not you too!
The Tattered Man waved his hand.
Nary die,
he said.
All I want is some pea soup and a good bed. Some pea soup,
he repeated dreamfully. The youth arose from the ground.
I wonder where he came from. I left him over there,
he pointed.
And now I find him here. And he was coming from over there, too.
He indicated a new direction. They both turned toward the body as if to ask of it a question.
Well,
at length spoke the Tattered Man.
There ain't no use in our staying here and trying to ask him anything.
The youth nodded in assent wearily. They both turned to gaze for a moment at the corpse. The youth murmured something.
Well, he was a Jim Dandy, wasn't he?
Said the Tattered Man, as if in response. They turned their backs upon it and started away. For a time they stole softly, treading with their toes. It remained, laughing, there in the grass.
I'm commencing to feel pretty bad,
said the Tattered Man, suddenly breaking one of his little silences.
I'm commencing to feel pretty damn bad.
The youth groaned. Oh, Lord. He wondered if he was to be the tortured witness of another grim encounter. But his companion waved his hand reassuringly.
Oh, I'm not going to die yet. They're too much dependent on me for to die yet. No, sir, I'd never die. I can't. You know how to see the swat of children I've got and all like that.
The youth, glancing at his companion, could see by the shadow of a smile that he was making some kind of fun. As they plodded on, the tattered soldier continued to talk.
Besides, if I died, I wouldn't die the way that feller did. That was the funniest thing. I'd just flop down, I would. I never seen a fella die the way that fella did. You know Tom Jameson? He lives next door to me up home. He's a nice fella, he is. We was all as good friends. Smart, too. Smart as a steel trap. Well, when we was a-fighting this afternoon, all of a sudden he began to rip up and cuss and color at me. You shot, you blamed infernal. Oh, he swear horrible. He says to me, I put up my hand to my head, and when I looked at my fingers, I seen, sure enough, I was shot. I give a holler and begin to run. Before I could get away, another one hit me in the arm and whirled me clean around. I got scared when they was all shooting behind me, and I run and beat all. But I cut you pretty bad. I have an idea I'd be a fighting yet if it weren't for Tom Jameson. Then he made a calm announcement. There's two of them, little ones. They're beginning to have fun with me now. I don't believe I can walk much further. They went slowly on in silence. You look pretty peaked yourself, said the tattered man at last. I bet you've got a worse one than you think. You'd better take care of your hurt. You don't let such things go. It might be inside mostly and then placed under. Where is it located? But he continued his harangue without waiting for a reply. I see a fellow get hit plumb in the head when my regiment was a standing to ease once. And everybody yelled to him, "Heard, John? Have you heard much?" "No," says he. He looked kind of surprised, and he went on telling him how he felt. He said he didn't feel nothing. By Dad, the first thing that fellow knowed, he was dead. Yes, he was dead, stone dead. So you want to watch out. You might have some queer kind of hurt yourself. You can't never tell. Where is yours located?
The youth had been wriggling since the introduction of this topic. He now gave a cry of exasperation and made a furious motion with his hand. "Oh, don't bother me," he said. He was enraged against the tattered man and could have strangled him. His companions seemed ever to play intolerable parts. They were ever upraising the ghost of shame on the stick of their curiosity. He turned toward the tattered man as one at bay. "Now don't bother me," he repeated with desperate menace.
Well, Lord knows I don't want to bother anybody, said the other.
There was a little accent of despair in his voice as he replied,
"Lord knows I've got enough of my own to tend to."
The youth, who had been holding a bitter debate with himself and casting glances of hatred and contempt at the tattered man, here spoke in a hard voice. "Goodbye," he said. The tattered man looked at him in gaping amazement. Why, partner, where are you going?" he asked unsteadily. The youth, looking at him, could see that he, too, like that other one, was beginning to act dumb and animal-like. His thoughts seemed to be floundering about in his head.
No. Look at here, you Tom Jameson. Now, I won't have this. This here won't do. Where are you going?
The youth pointed vaguely. "Over there," he replied.
"Well, look at here now,"
said the tattered man, rambling on in idiot fashion. His head was hanging forward, and his words were slurred.
"This thing won't do now, Tom Jameson. It won't do. I know you big-headed devil. You want to go drop it off with a bad hurt. It ain't right now, Tom Jameson. It ain't. You want to leave me to take care of you, Tom Jameson. It ain't right. It ain't for you to go drop it off with a bad hurt. It ain't right. It ain't."
In reply, the youth climbed a fence and started away. He could hear the tattered man bleating plaintively. Once he faced about angrily.
"What? Look here now, Tom Jameson. Now, it ain't."
The youth went on. Turning at a distance, he saw the tattered man wandering about helplessly in the field. He now thought that he wished he was dead. He believed he envied those men whose bodies lay strewn over the grass of the fields and on the fallen leaves of the forest. The simple questions of the tattered man had been knife thrusts to him. They asserted a society that probes pitilessly its secrets until all is apparent. His late companion's chance persistency made him feel that he could not keep his crime concealed in his bosom. It was sure to be brought plain by one of those arrows which cloud the air and are constantly pricking, discovering, proclaiming those things which are willed to be forever hidden. He admitted that he could not defend himself against this agency. It was not within the power of vigilance.
Okay. things for chapter 10. The Tattered Man kept pointing out that Jim died very strangely. He ran until he died. And then he starts asking Henry about where he was shot, where was he hit, where was his wound, and Henry again became very ashamed. So what did he end up doing? He left him. The Tattered Man started dying, and rather than sitting with another guy watching him die, he just walked away. So this is the second time he ran away. And towards the end of the chapter, he sees all the corpses and he says that he envies the dead men. Okay, I think we have enough time for chapter 11. So new section, chapter 11. Middle of page 71.
Chapter 11. He became aware that the furnace roar of the battle was growing louder. Great brown clouds had floated to the still heights of air before him. The noise, too, was approaching. The woods filtered men, and the fields became dotted. As he rounded a hillock, he perceived that the roadway was now a crying mass of wagons, teams, and men. From the heaving tangle issued exhortations, commands, imprecations. Fear was sweeping it all along. The cracking whips bit, and horses plunged and tugged. The white-topped wagons strained and stumbled in their exertions like fat sheep. The youth felt comforted in a measure by this sight. They were all retreating. Perhaps then he was not so bad after all. He seated himself and watched the terror-stricken wagons. They fled like soft, ungainly animals. All the roars and lashers served to help him to magnify the dangers and horrors of the engagement, that he might try to prove to himself that the thing with which men could charge him was in truth a symmetrical act. There was an amount of pleasure to him in watching the wild march of this vindication. Presently the calm head of a forward-going column of infantry appeared in the road. It came swiftly on. Avoiding the obstructions gave it the sinuous movement of a serpent. The men at the head butted mules with their musket stocks. They prodded teamsters indifferent to all howls. The men forced their way through parts of the dense mass by strength. The blunt head of the column pushed. The raving teamsters swore many strange oaths. The commands to make way had the ring of a great importance in them. The men were going forward to the heart of the din. They were to confront the eager rush of the enemy. They felt the pride of their onward movement when the remainder of the army seemed trying to dribble down this road. They tumbled teams about with a fine feeling that it was no matter so long as their column got to the front in time. This importance made their faces grave and stern, and the backs of the officers were very rigid. As the youth looked at them, the black weight of his woe returned to him. He felt that he was regarding a procession of chosen beings. The separation was as great to him as if they had marched with weapons of flame and banners of sunlight. He could never be like them. He could have wept in his longings. He searched about in his mind for an adequate malediction for the indefinite cause, the thing upon which men turn the words of final blame.
Focus, please.
It, whatever it was responsible for him, he said. There lay the fault. The haste of the column to reach the battle seemed to the forlorn young man to be something much finer than stout fighting. Heroes, he thought, could find excuses in that long, seething lane. They could retire with perfect self-respect and make excuses to the stars. He wondered what those men had eaten, that they could be in such haste to force their way to grim chances of death. As he watched, His envy grew, until he thought that he wished to change lives with one of them. He would have liked to have used a tremendous force, he said, throw off himself and become a better. Swift pictures of himself, apart, yet in himself, came to him. A blue, desperate figure leading lurid charges with one knee forward and a broken blade high. A blue, determined figure standing before a crimson and steel assault, getting calmly killed on a high place before the eyes of all. He thought of the magnificent pathos of his dead body. These thoughts uplifted him. He felt the quiver of war desire. In his ears he heard the ring of victory. He knew the frenzy of a rapid, successful charge. The music of the trampling feet, the sharp voices, the clanking arms of the column near him, made him soar on the red wings of war. For a few moments he was sublime. He thought that he was about to start for the front. Indeed, he saw a picture of himself, dust-stained, haggard, panting, flying to the front at the proper moment to seize and throttle the dark, leering witch of calamity. Then the difficulties of the thing began to drag at him. He hesitated, balancing awkwardly on one foot. He had no rifle. He could not fight with his hands, said he resentfully to his plan. Well, rifles could be had for the picking. They were extraordinarily profuse. Also, he continued, it would be a miracle if he found his regiment. Well, he could fight with any regiment. He started forward slowly. He stepped as if he expected to tread upon some explosive thing. Doubts and he were struggling. He would truly be a worm if any of his comrades should see him returning thus, the marks of his flight upon him. There was a reply that the intent fighters did not care for what happened rearward, saving that no hostile bayonets appeared there. In the battle blur, his face would, in a way, be hidden, like the face of a cowled man. Then he said that his tireless fate would bring forth, when the strife lulled for a moment, a man to ask of him an explanation. In imagination, he felt the scrutiny of his companions as he painfully labored through some lies. Eventually, his courage expended itself upon these objections. The debates drained him of his fire.